so we can agree and disagree on a lot of things. Best pizza in the city, peak fiction, whether a burger is a sandwich or its own thing. One thing that I think that we can all hold hands and come together collectively about is that Columbia University sucks, and that is not a new phenomenon. So I'm a little late on this subject, doesn't matter, I would rather be late than never. It is very important. I'm sure that by now you are all familiar with Columbia University protests calling for the school's divestment from the state of Israel and all of the legal matters, controversies, and violent police sweeps that followed in 2024. I have talked about it plenty. However, I hope that by now you have heard of Mahmoud Khalil. If not, I will fill you in. Mahmoud Khalil is a Palestinian activist who lives in America, has a green card, and has not been charged with any crimes. But he was recently abducted by ICE. The government is justifying this abduction and potential deportation based upon the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with this law, but it is flat out McCarthyism. He was ripped away from his pregnant wife and sent over to an ICE facility in Louisiana. His lawyers are arguing for him to be brought back to New York, but the Trump administration wants him to be in a court that is more likely to rule in favor of their wishes. Why, you ask? Because the government is expanding efforts to rapidly crack down on pro-Palestinian activism and free speech in general by making examples out of law-abiding residents and citizens to unconstitutionally silence us by way of fear. And they're doing this at a time when Israel is massively ramping up their genocide against Palestinians. If it wasn't blazingly obvious before, it should be now. Freedom of speech doesn't actually exist here in the States, nor does justice, or now the concept of checks and balances. Trump is deporting people with green cards, deporting people with perfectly valid visas, and attempting to use an act that is highly controversial because it is best known for when it was last used in World War II for the internment of Japanese and Japanese American people. This act is a shameful stain on American history, but not to Trump. It's useful to him. In action, this act allows the president to authorize the deportation and detaining of natives and citizens of an enemy nation without any actual process. And he's using it to bypass our justice system to speed up deportations. It's all a part of this administration laying out the groundwork to see if they can take whatever flimsy and interpretive avenue that they want to centralize authority into the executive branch and do whatever they want and ignore court orders. Just want to hammer home, if they can do that, that makes whoever is in charge more of a king than a US president. Anyways, of course, no surprise here, the institution that is at the center of this controversy is none other than Columbia University. Mahmoud Khalil is a student at Columbia University, lives in and was detained at the entrance of a Columbia University-owned apartment building. He was deemed to be a terrorist sympathizer for his support and activism for his own people to, stop getting murdered and ethnically cleansed, and for Columbia University to divest from the forces funding, capitalizing off of, collaborating with, and organizing the very same destruction. Khalil is a student negotiator, which means that he is often speaking directly with university officials and the press. It is reported that he was worried about an unlawful deportation just like this because of 13 misconduct allegations that had to do with online posts that had nothing to do with him. Which brings us to Columbia University's financial trouble and the secretive disciplinary office investigators. Trump has been speaking a lot about fighting anti-Semitism on university campuses. He's going to do this by slashing funding to universities that do not comply with his insane and unhinged standards, which in reality is a direct attack on freedom of speech and activism, which was part of the plan this whole time. And the school funding is still getting cut because they effectively pour gasoline on the fire when their goal is to put out the fire. They're truly getting it from all angles. Zionists hate Columbia because Columbia, quote unquote, allows anti-Semitism on campus, when this is in reality peaceful protests. And Palestinian liberation supporters hate Columbia because they are objectively a Zionist institution who unleashes harm and legal turmoil on their students, who are simply exercising their right to free speech. If you ask me, I say that you could either have your funding get cut with these peaceful protests that make you look very, very bad, or the school can actually divest and probably still get their funding cut, but they get to watch as the protesters pack up and stop exposing the school as demons are us. Sure, there will be other consequences with such divestment, but let's just go ahead and pretend that we're not talking about doing the right thing and standing up to genocide here. How many more unjust expulsions, police sweeps, and situations like Mahmoud Khalil is it gonna take before Columbia University calls it? I don't know, all I'm saying is it kinda seems like not divesting seems like it's working out pretty bad for them. Columbia University students have been, especially as of recently, targeted for often very simple acts of protests in favor of the school's divestment from the state of Israel. I'm talking allegations of discriminatory harassment for attending protests, writing completely appropriate op-eds, and putting up very standard and non-threatening stickers and posters, etc. Khalil was approached by the disciplinary office with these allegations and was asked to sign an NDA. Just like many other students, when these investigators talk with them attempting to get information on other pro-Palestinian activists. However, he refused to sign the NDA and give over any of this information, which led the disciplinary office to threaten to bar him from graduating. He had this appealed and got them to back down from this. However, he was arrested a day after following up and reaching out to Columbia University regarding these accusations. Not a fucking good look for Columbia University. Between bowing to Donald Trump, the shady and unhinged disciplinary committee, and everything that Columbia has been up to for over the last year and beyond, they are not well known for being on the right side of history. We will get into that in a second. I think that it's pretty reasonable to think maybe, just maybe, Columbia University had a helping hand in all of this. So of course, there's been yet another explosion of activism at Columbia University. Once again, looking like an absolute fucking clown house. Very consistently does Columbia University shit the bed. It's almost impressive. It's like every chance they get an opportunity to do so, they say, hey, let's stand on the objectively wrong side of history on this one. Hey, everybody, what if we just consistently made the wrong choice and ended up in our grandchildren's history books supporting the side that everybody disagrees with in retrospect? It is not surprising in the very least that Columbia University is doing all this. After all, they are an elite school. With a degree from Columbia, you could go to the very top and make a lot of decisions that people will fucking protest. They usually love the way things work and they usually want to protect the status quo. But how do they shake off all this bad reputation throughout the passage of time? You see, like the leechy opportunists they are, Columbia University prides themselves on university alumni and their involvement in many instances of bleeding edge activism, giving their university free press because of their wonderful students who always did the right thing. Back in 1968, the university had plans to build a gymnasium, of which plans were incredibly racist. Folks in the historically black surrounding neighborhoods and communities were to have little access to the gym and were to use a separate exit on a lower floor of the building. So the neighboring communities, which were disproportionately black, had little access to the gym and had to use a side door, and the university students who were disproportionately white got to use the main entrance and had full access. So many people pointed out, hey, this operates just like a segregated gym. In fact, many people called it Jim Crow. Not to mention, Columbia University already had a bad reputation of displacing Harlem residents throughout their expansion efforts. This was also a time when many students were protesting the school's involvement in weapons research for the Vietnam War. This was specifically over the university's affiliation with the Institute for Defense Analysis. Discovery of this affiliation launched many anti-war protest campaigns on campus, which eventually led to 6 activists being suspended, which further drew out tensions. This all mashed together to form these huge protest campaigns against Columbia University. And in response, Columbia University called NYPD and ordered them to storm the campus, sweep the encampments, clear the occupied facilities, and be extremely violent in the process. Seems a little familiar, no? Looking back on the sit-ins and clearing of protests and just the general disregard for justice, the condemnation of pro-war behavior and equality, you can't help but feel the weight of the past now. And it doesn't stop at racism and the atrocities of the Vietnam War. We're also talking about activism over the school being friendly to Nazis in the 1930s. activism demanding the divestment from companies who are supporters and profiteers of South African apartheid, and of course, much, much more. Well, this is horrible. They consistently make the wrong choice. How do they benefit from this? You have a benefit when you are the current university administration. An administration that, could claim to be compromised of people who were in the very same protests in the past. So it's easy for them to condemn the old administration and say, we're not them. We love activism, except for when we don't. I need to believe that there is a good future at the end of all this. I am so sure that when all the work is done, when a meaningful ceasefire is finally reached, when Israel is finally held responsible for committing genocide, when we are moving forwards towards a more prosperous, just, and non-destructive future for Palestinians, the future Columbia University administration will pride themselves on the alumni who stood up in the face of genocide and give themselves a pat on the back. What the fuck is learning a lesson? What the fuck is applying what we learned in history today? I understand that having a degree from Columbia University is one of the biggest academic flexes out there, but there eventually becomes a point when having one of these degrees becomes a bit of a red flag for at least some people. Will we ever cross that threshold? Who knows? I unfortunately think that their high status will never be affected by any of this shit. But a boy can dream, can he? Truly nauseating stuff, folks. Anyways, fuck Columbia University, free Mahmoud Khalil, free Palestine, show me my patrons. Have a wonderful day.